I did not hear that. I did not recognize that. Hello, everyone. This is your friend Carlz, straight to the point, with another episode of a casual conversation where I talk about mostly movies that I did a reflection that I did in Spanish, and now I do it in English. Well, it hasn't been that long since I did my Spanish one. Just the things kind of like grew naturally in that sense. Um, well, there are a couple of things that I have to make clear before I go into the episode. And one, probably the most important one, and it's the point that I want to come across from the whole episode, is the concept of objectivity and subjectivity, especially as it happens or as it's related to the arts in general. So, to put it bluntly, there are basically no objective judgments as far as taste and the how can you call it, the assessment of the arts. It's just there isn't the space of subjectivity that we get when we experience a piece of art, a work of art, a movie, a song, a painting. That space of subjectivity is basically what grants us our humanity, our kind of like a space for be our own creative force when we are looking at something and we are having ideas, experiences, feelings. That is the whole space of subjectivity, and it's really important. It's really important not only to preserve it, but like to use it properly. Nowadays, when we talk about the arts, there are several ways in which people try to bring quote unquote objectivity into the field of subjectivity, which is something that it really bothers me, and it really seems to never help the process of the discussion. It never seems to help the process of thinking about the arts. Why is this? Because basically, when you bring objectivity to the field of subjectivity, you are mostly doing one thing. You're trying to protect your opinion or put your opinion over the opinion of others, or like make it in a way in which your opinion is kind of like protected behind this wall of objectivity. For example, I would say like I think this song is objectively bad. That is the most common used phrase in nowadays, where everybody, including me, all of us, enjoy talking about the arts. Sometimes we get into these more combatant states of discussions, and it happens with fandoms and everything. Well, it's just how it is nowadays, and people often quote or like call to this false sense of objectivity to defend their opinions, which is completely wrong. Of course, you can think whatever you want to think about something, and as far as yeah, it's as far, right, as far as it's not concerning facts, you can say whatever the fuck you want, and that is the space of subjectivity. Now, what is the point of having this aspect really clear when you talk about the arts? The point is, nowadays there are a lot of bad products, and you wonder how do we measure how these products are bad if it's only a space of subjectivity. Is this just shared subjectivity in which all of our subjective or common subjectivity just grants the title of bad or just judges something as bad? You know, it could be really easy to think in that way. It could be really easy. But whenever you find something that is allegedly bad, you always get pieces of it, and some of those pieces are fine to not say they are objectively bad, but to judge as bad as they are compared to similar examples on the same field or in the same art. This came to me, I've been meaning to talk about The Room for a long time, but my interest to talk about The Room was born out of a really foreign place, or a really unexpected place. That place was a movie called Immortal Kombat. For those of you who don't know, this company called Asylum Movies or Asylum Production Company, whatever, they make their living out of making a really ethereal, ambiguous sort of product. Because, of course, Immortal Kombat is a direct call to Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat 2 is the upcoming Mortal Kombat film, which is an adaptation of the video games, right? But it has nothing to do with it. That's kind of like the messed up thing in this whole process. Immortal Kombat is not a parody of Mortal Kombat, it's not a version, it's not a remake, and even more so, the plot has nothing to do with Mortal Kombat. To put it briefly, the plot of Immortal Kombat has a company who has the technology to bring people from the past into the future, fight in a tournament. So they bring like Genghis Khan, Joan the Arc, and a couple of other people. They bring into the future so they would fight to the death. Thus the connection to Mortal Kombat, right? Here's the thing. This company is known for making these movies, and everybody sort of assumes that they are bad. But when you see these movies, even if most likely they are bad, why are they bad? That is the thing. Immortal Kombat, even though it's a crappy movie, a low budget movie with mediocre actors and way more AI that I care for, which it's worth noting that AI is gonna do wonders for these kind of shitty companies. Like full scenes just made straight out made with AI, and then you can get in a whole different argument or discussion about how does AI helps these companies fulfill their potential ideas. For example, there are several crowd shots in Immortal Kombat, like which are definitely made by AI. So you get into the argument: is it fair for them to use AI in this case, since they don't have the resources to do so otherwise? Is it fair? Do you give them a pass? In this case, I don't give them a pass because it looks like shit. But in another scenarios, that could be the case. I know fucking Tommy Wiseau would definitely use it. But anyways, why is this movie bad? Okay, so we jump straight into the comparison between bad movies. And of course, I gotta say, the main movie that I'm talking today is Tommy Wiseau's The Room. Now a bona fide classic or a cult classic. Why? That was the whole question that popped into my head, and it's been brewing between this. Why is bad movie Immortal Kombat just plain old bad and gonna go into history as just another Asylum crap? And why is The Room so beloved? You can of course go point by point, kind of like comparing the movies, acting, effects, what else, plot. You can go point by point, and if you go point by point, you get into some interesting contrasts. Let's do some of them just for sake of fun. For example, acting. Acting is a big deal in this The Room phenomena. The acting in Immortal Kombat has this thing where you get really, and I don't want to sound mean, but you get like mediocre actors, right? But they are actors. I've said it several times. You don't need to be an expert in film or movies to sort of get an appreciation of good acting. Good acting is something that you just enjoy, and it absorbs you as a viewer, and as an spectator. If you see a good performance, you don't need to be an expert on it. You just get like absorbed by it. That doesn't happen, of course, in either of these movies. In a way, right? That's kind of like the surprise for later. So you have a bunch of mediocre actors kind of doing their best in Immortal Kombat, and that is something that cannot be denied even if they are mm, green or they are plainly bad, they are actors doing their job. You take that to the room, and the room doesn't have actors. Not all of them are actors. You can tell many of them are just like trying actings maybe, or taking an opportunity for like a cash check, for a paycheck, for them to be there. You can tell that they are like winging it. They are like doing it not only bad, but without any passion. And of course, you can say this is related to money. They didn't have money to bring bigger actors, whatever the case. But here, and I began by comparing acting, because immediately you see what makes the room unique. And this is gonna be the thing that is gonna permeate any sort of thought about the room. For those of you who don't know, the room is this weird phenomena as a movie, because basically it's the workings, the mind delusions, whatever you want to call it, a vomit of creativity of one person, which is Tommy Wiseau, which is this subhuman kind of like alien weirdo who, to this day, I'm not sure if the mystery remains, but when the movie began to pick up popularity, he was the center of attention. He was the center of everything. And he was that because basically nobody knew who he was. But for some reason, this weird guy with a random European accent, or like European, had the money to make this movie. And the movie even begins with his crappy logo of Wiseau Productions, which is like a gif of like it's like the globe, and it says Wiseau, like, and it's like going around the world. Like, it's just stupid. But anyways, this guy is a mystery, not only as to where he got the money, or like the writing of the movie, anything, but he himself, in his performance as an actor, that in on itself is just some crazy ass freak of nature. He obviously, due to his own ego, put himself in the protagonist role, the main role of the movie, of Johnny, the guy who basically is cheated on and everybody betrays him. He even says so plenty of times. Everybody betrays him, and spoiler, he ends up shooting himself. Now, it's not necessarily bad that the guy who paid and created put himself in it, but he is, and here's the thing, I can't is he objectively a bad actor? Is he even trying? Like, there's no way you can say he's a good actor unless you start creating a speech or an interpretation to his performance. His performance is so bad, like, you need to create a speech behind it to sort of complement the nonsense that you're watching. Sometimes you don't understand him, even though he is clearly dubbed in the movie. He has this deadpan face, like, he never changes his looks. He has this water like greasy hair all the time. He doesn't talk good. He doesn't react good. He reacts oddly to some odd fucking situations, by giggling, by laughing, by behaving. He's all over the place. And he's so strange, so weird, that you have only two choices. You either accept that he sucks and this is terrible, or you create a mystic around him. And here's when we kind of like dive right into the room, and we start seeing the source, the base of these movies, ever growing kind of like following or enjoyment. I keep thinking about people who had the chance to see the room when it came out, to see it before it is what it is, because now this movie is way more than it could have ever become when it came out. And this is a movie that is showing us that the judgment on whether a movie is bad is becoming increasingly affected by factors or elements that are completely unrelated to the film itself. We are talking about social media, we are talking about not only social media but social networks, and I don't know, general appreciation. You can easily Google any kind of like meme or funny scene of the movie, and now the movie has an energy or a life of its own beyond the film itself. And why is this so curious? Because if you see the movie is super boring. You know, we're talking about how the cult of personality of Tommy Wiseau sort of made this movie into a phenomena. But did he did this for the movie or really for himself? We can keep going back to the comparison and the idea of a bad movie. And if you see The Room, it's really boring and it's really badly made. Not only in general, but in many elements of it. Like the acting is so bad. As I said, there are no actors. The scenario, the cinematography, even the overall look of it. The how do you call the elements of the sets, right? The sets, the physicality, general cinematography, right? The thing about this is that, as I said at the beginning, are we sort of touching this area of something being objectively bad? You know, like one of the things that it really piques your attention if you're watching The Room is the fact that it seems to be like really poorly directed. But you know, to have a broader kind of like image of the movie, to try to dive into its cult status, you need to go watch some reaction or read some reactions. You need to go and sort of imbue yourself in it. Personally, when I heard of the movie, it was already kind of like growing into a phenomenon. I've seen this movie like a handful of times, 4 or 5 times. When I saw it first, it was already making the runs of this unbelievable bad movie. It was already making the runs, and I saw it first, and I keep remembering. Well, the first thing I always remember is that the damn movie has like 4 sex scenes in the first half hour of it, and they are probably the most uncomfortable sex scenes you will ever see in a movie. Like period. They're just so uncomfortable to watch, and some people, a lot of people have pointed out how the sex scenes, they just look alien and they look bizarre, especially because Wiseau keeps trusting in the most random body parts of what was the name of the lady? Lisa. He keeps just trusting like into her belly button, her ribs. Like, it's just bizarre. But whatever the case, you see that movie first, and what do you remember about it? What do you really remember? You only remember the stupid part, the funny part, the bad performances, the weird writing. You know, one of the most famous one is the Lisa's mom saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna die. I have cancer," with like a flat delivery that is unbelievable. But I took a trip through the letterbox, the letterbox page for The Room, and something really funny happened in the letterbox page of The Room. It seems that it has turned into this you only give it 1 star, or you only give it 5 stars sort of phenomena. And Letterboxd, for all its fame, it has sort of become a competition for who can be the funniest in reviews and comments, right? And who can be the funny? So it doesn't really serve the purpose of it. It doesn't really shows you on a serious take on the movie. Somebody really saying, "Oh, I think this is good for this and this reason, and I think this is bad for this and this reason." It really doesn't. What does that really mean? It means, as I said at some point recently, that the movie has outgrown its possible criticism, or the possible kind of like bad or good things you can say about it. So you come back to you personally. You come back to whatever you think. Okay, let's forget the cult status. Let's forget the letterbox. Let's forget let's forget everybody. Let's just focus on yourself. And in this case, myself. And as I watched this movie for the most recent time, a couple of days ago, I keep realizing that, as I said before, the movie is extremely boring because the plot is extremely obvious. The script is super, like, if there is anything close to AI before AI was a thing, is this script. It's so stupid, it's so obvious, it's so plain, and like everything in the movie is bad. Everything. This time I got really triggered by one of the sets, one of the living room. I don't know. The room is so strange. I don't know if it has many sides, if it has different rooms, if it's just one. But in one scene, Lisa and her mom are talking, and behind the mom there's a TV. And for some reason, I keep getting freaked out by the fact that she has a TV on her back, and all of the couch, and like there's like a couch and like a long couch and a short couch. They are both in the worst positions to watch that TV, and I'm like, how are you supposed to watch that TV when you are facing the other way? But whatever. So which parts of the room still amused me now? And of course they are the ridiculous ones. Of course they are the stupidest ones. Like, it's either Tommy Wiseau dressed as this sports person, like he plays quote unquote football with Mark, wearing the most random attire. Is it him saying hi doggy, or is it him you're tearing me apart? Is it him like acting poorly to everything? It's always him. It's always him. Even when it's other characters, even when it's Lisa and Mark talking, the writing is Wiseau's. It's his mind doing that poor fucking writing. How many times does Lisa does the exact same thing? Like, I don't love him anymore, like I hate him. Or Johnny himself. How many times does he say like, yeah, like he's my best friend? Like, the writing is terrible, but why do you keep enjoying seeing Wiseau being weird? And that is the key to my argument for why is a bad movie such a bad movie as The Room having the space that it has. And this is my sort of controversial take. And I think it's controversial because it involves laughing at someone, not with someone. Here's the thing. We like The Room, or at least I do, and I think many people do the same. We enjoy this movie was because, first of all, it's unbelievable that this is a real person, Tommy Wiseau, and we just like laughing at him. You know, like middle school, high school bullies, we just enjoy laughing at him. That's the truth. Like, you don't want to think about it because you don't want to, like, well, maybe you do, but you don't want to sound mean. You don't want to sound that you only like laughing at this poor guy, but he's not really a poor guy. He's allegedly quite rich, so he's still punching up. But that is the key. That is the latest key I understood from this movie. People like it because we like to laugh at this guy. The question is, why is it so fun? And I think that is where we connect the fact that the movie is bad with the fact that the movie is so famous and why it's quote unquote beloved. Wiseau himself, besides of the movie, has nurtured this image of a weirdo. He has exploited this. He has further increased his legend as this weirdo guy. Like it's something that has just grown over the years. For some reason, seeing him being a weirdo gives him and it's not like a superhuman, it's like an extra human quality. For some reason, laughing at him doesn't make you feel guilty. For some reason, laughing at him feels like natural. Like he wouldn't, either he wouldn't understand it, or like he's so into his world that he wouldn't get the point. Back to Immortal Kombat, I kept thinking about how even if those actors are bad, even if they are in this poor movie, I'm pretty sure if you go to them and you go like, yeah, your performance sucks, man, like you were so bad in this movie, I'm pretty sure they would be affected. I'm pretty sure they would be moved. They would be like, man, I did my best, or like I'm trying to do my best. But that doesn't happen with Wiseau. It's like you see him and you can almost feel like if you told him like, dude, you suck, you're like the worst actor I've ever seen, part of you thinks like he won't understand that. It's not possible for him to understand that. It's not possible for him to have seen this movie while it was being edited. It's impossible for him to have seen that and gone, this is great. There's no way. There's no way. And then we get into the subjectivity point again, right? Does that mean that he's objectively bad? I don't think that's the case. I think he's universally subjectively bad. I think that what we do to give credit to The Room is to make this grandiose kind of like how can you say, like we create speeches to defend this movie. We create speeches to defend ourselves from liking this movie. You know, even if you go to, let's talk about Letterboxd a little bit. Even if you go to some Letterboxd reviews and you see people trying to create narratives about this movie, there are some that are like actually really funny. Like The Room is just a room because, and it's called The Room because this room is sort of like a purgatory, you know. There's talks about death, so this room might be purgatory and it's haunted. That's why the room is weird. That's why you don't go to any other places, even though they go to the park at some point. There are like ways of making interpretations about this movie and try to justify what I think that is plain, explicit and obvious, which is that we just like laughing at this guy because he's a weirdo. That's it. But that is not the whole movie. Even though it carries the movie, it's not the whole movie. So it has plain boring parts of it. So we go back to the fact that, or like to the comment on whether a movie, or what makes a movie bad and what makes a movie good. This was the final reflection that I did the other day as I was watching Paul Thomas Anderson, There Will Be Blood, and I don't want to be the one comparing There Will Be Blood to The Room, But there was one aspect of it that really got my attention. There Will Be Blood, even though it has amazing performances by Paul Dano and company, it's a Daniel Day-Lewis movie. It's a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, which it basically means that it's longer than 2 hours, and it has Daniel Day-Lewis being like a black hole who absorbs all of your attention and has like the fucking powerful performance that you will probably never forget. "I'm done," he said at the end after bashing Paul Dano's head to the ground. You know? "Oh, don't talk about my son, I slit your throat." So, what is the point of this? Two movies, one bad, one good, that are completely led by one character and one person. One of them has a great performance, the other one has a shitty performance. The one that has a great performance basically does what good acting does, which is transport you to this fantasy world of movies. The other one, on the other hand, does something similar. It transports you to whatever the place it is. But whereas the Daniel Day-Lewis performance kind of like absorbs you into the spirits of the movie, this one absorbs you into the kind of like the orbit of Tommy Wiseau. You know, in the end, making a good movie is not that complicated. I know it sounds absurd to say it, but this is my point. A good movie, most good movies to me, they're simple. Even if they have convoluted scripts or plots that play a little bit with reality or ideas, they are simple. And There Will Be Blood is one example of that. It's just this passion-filled story of this guy who wants to own the world, who is taken over by the early spirit of capitalism. He wants to control everything. He is aggressive, you know. But at the same time, you see him debating his place in the world, debating his role as a father, you know. So he shares some degree of humanity. You see him exploiting and struggling spiritually as he interacts with Paul Dano's character and religion, you know. Spoiler, but at the end, capitalism wins, of course, and religion is never gonna win, and he's pretty proud of having won. But you can see him like being challenged by it and having doubts about it. You can see all of that, but the story is simple. It's just this one guy who owns a drilling company, and they are taking over drilling places in the US and making money. You know, it's simple. I call this the if you take that into this idea of simplicity into bad movies, I call it the what without an answer. This is what I've been working on. Bad movies, when you ask a what, the less answer you get, the funnier they get. You know? Let's go back to Immortal Kombat and The Room. In Immortal Kombat, even though it's a bad movie, whenever you ask something of it, there's always an answer. It's like, why are they in this tournament? These people brought them to do this and that. Why are they acting like that? Because they want to do this and they want to do that. The more you ask questions to it, the more, not that they make sense, but they make sense in the context of the movie. Whereas for The Room, you can ask questions with like no sense, with no plausible answers. For example, like why does the mom, or like Lisa, why don't they react to the fact that she's dying? You know, or like why do Lisa and Johnny has this couple of random guys that go have sex in the room. And they go like, yeah, there's some guys that come hang out and have sex in the room. Like, why? Why does Johnny carries flowers upside down where he can drop them? You know? Why? Or like, what is Johnny's job? You know, it's like a banker, but like he can't say. Like, why did Lisa stop caring for Johnny? It's just shit that just happens. You know? But the moment you get into a weird ass funny scene, you ask those questions and you realize they don't really matter. You know, you can see the play here. But as I'm running out of time, I need to bring this to a close. You know, as I said a little bit before, that people create speeches to justify what they think is good about this movie, which is basically what I've been doing for half an hour, right? Trying to introduce several comparing points and several arguments by comparing different films to try to understand not what makes The Room a good or a bad movie, but to try to convince myself that there is any other enjoyment in this movie besides the fucked up person that is Tommy Wiseau. That tried to find something enjoyable other than making fun of him, other than laughing at him. And you do it because you don't want to be a mean person. You do that because you want to give the movie a fair chance. You do that because, as I said at the very beginning, in the exercise of subjectivity, nothing is objectively bad. But as you do that, as you go through ideas and as you are building your speech or your arguments, whether it's just for yourself or to share, as you are building these arguments on whether you think this movie is good or bad, right? As you are creating it, you start finding it harder and harder to make it about something else. Because even if you created this elaborate speech or interpretation about it, as I said before, the one that The Room is a purgatory and everything, blah blah blah, ask yourself this: you get the most elaborate interpretation of The Room, like the most elaborate one, 200 pages of a theory about the other world and human psyche and betrayal and Hamlet or Romeo and Juliet references about the passion of love, whatever. Ask yourself this: you do that interpretation, and now what happens to that whole interpretation if you replace Tommy Wiseau with a good actor? What happens? Does this movie retains its appeal? Would you have even watched it if he wasn't the lead? You see the point? No matter how much effort you make, this is my final conclusion. The Room is a vanity project by an egomaniacal weirdo who might or might not be a human being, who is called Tommy Wiseau. And no matter how much effort you put into it, the mere fact that this movie exists gives him a position of power which not justifies but makes it okay for you to laugh at him. You know? And his weirdness, his weirdness seeps through the entire movie because he's the producer, he's the director, he's the writer, he's everything. So even if the other actors or characters are trying to do something else, or they are trying to do good, or they're trying to perform, like everything in the movie is about him. So the status of cult classic movie for The Room now, the fact that we laughed at it and the fact that we enjoy it, is exclusively us laughing at Tommy Wiseau, without a shadow of a doubt. Because in the end, the whole movie, it's kind of boring. Besides the weird parts, the awkward performances, often led by him, it's kind of boring. Some of the scenes where he's not in, it's just awkward and not funny. So in the end, is The Room an objectively bad movie? I think we can conclude that even though there's no objectively bad movie in the appreciation of the arts, the more effort you have to make to defend it probably means that there's some universality to its shortcomings. That's kind of like a politically correct answer, if you want to put it like that. The Room will live forever from now on in the internet meme era as this weird, strange moment in film history, which is ultimately just us laughing at a weird guy. That's it. So, just thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching The Room. I don't know, getting swallowed by the euphoria, the shared euphoria of the bad movie. Let's share it at least. And, in the end, just having a good time and laughing, it's a pretty fair thing to experience in a movie. And ultimately, I don't think he knows we're laughing at him. I don't think he does, honestly. Because he's like an alien, so he has no idea how normal social norms work. Or maybe he does, and this is just a long con. And when you finally talk to him in person, he doesn't have a weird accent, and his hair is finally dried, and it's not full of grease, and who knows. But anyways, that's my time for today. Thank you all for listening. If ever, I would love to hear more impressions or ideas of The Room. I read my fair share in the internet and Letterboxd, but I would love to keep hearing ideas of the movie. But until the next one, I leave you with that. I leave you with I did not, and many other phrases that will live forever. Thank you for listening. See you next time.